The federal government stepping up in its fight against teen vaping. They are warning companies about using online influencers to help them boost sales. Jennifer Bellamy explains why they are taking this highly unusual step.
Jeff, federal agencies sent letters to several vape companies that used paid social media influencers or people with large followings online to promote their products on platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Vape companies will have to find other ways to push their products. That's after letters from the Food and Drug Administration and Federal Trade Commission warned 4 companies against using paid social influencers to endorse their electronic cigarettes. Solus Vapor, Hype City Vapors, Humble Juice Co., and Artist Liquid Labs all received the messages. Influencers touted flavors like watermelon patch and strawberry kiwi to their followers, but their posts didn't include mandatory warnings that vaping liquids contain nicotine, which is addictive. Facebook doesn't allow ads for e-cigarettes, even with warnings included, and the FTC has been pressuring influencers to tell followers when they're being paid to back something. It's all an effort to turn the tide on what the government calls an epidemic of underage e-cig use, as researchers have linked the trend to more online videos, pictures, and posts about vaping, with some of the content coming from companies, advertising agencies, and those influencers. A study recently found a nearly 80% spike in teen vaping last year, and while the devices have been billed as less harmful than traditional cigarettes or a way to quit smoking, experts still warn that nicotine can hurt a developing brain, and many young people have no idea what they're using as an addictive chemical. Now, Juul, a popular e-cigarette company, wasn't mentioned in all of this. That's because they shut down their Facebook and Instagram accounts last November after increased scrutiny of their actions. The company told senators in April it doesn't use paid online influencers and said they have shifted their focus to older adults looking to quit smoking.
All right, Jennifer, thank you.